John Clayton, the Washington Post, covers the NFL, long time on the NFL. Free agency officially opens tomorrow, but we know things are already happening all over the NFL. Not a lot happening here in Philly, but we'll get some takes from John on what's going on around the league and get some opinions from him on what could be on the way as he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John Clayton, welcome back, pal. How you been?
Good. Don't you get to think there was some illegal tampering sometime last week to get the point right now we've got more than 60 guys who've agreed to move to different teams, probably about 50 that have re-signed with their teams. But don't you kind of get the feeling that this might have started a little bit before Monday?
just slightly. I don't know why. Well, what was the whole reason why they just don't start the year on Monday and say, hey, it's open for business. You can start signing free agents, but your salary cap needs to be in order by Wednesday. Because obviously there's a lot of teams like Philadelphia that can't get involved, John, because they can't get cap compliant yet.
Well, actually, the legal tampering period was actually a good thing because they didn't have it. I think it was about 6 years ago, something like that they put it in. And, of course, what ends up happening, if you're a team, you can't get a gauge is what your guy to try to re-sign is going to get. Now at least you know where it's like, okay, if this guy's going to get 12.5, I mean, it's like if Corey Linsley's going to get 12.5, well, I'm not going to be able to keep him in Green Bay, so I'll let him go to the Los Angeles Chargers. So this actually turned into a good thing because everybody started free agency cold, and you knew that the teams that had the cap room were going to be aggressive, but you just didn't know what the numbers are. At least starting Monday, you knew what the numbers are and what you can keep and what you can't keep.
Well, we know that there's been a lot of movement so far. I want to get your take on this change of heart or change of philosophy, if you will, by the New England Patriots, who have really sat out free agency in years past, but this year they turned into the Washington football team of years past.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of understand it because, well, and obviously with Cam Newton signing a one-year, $5 million contract, this is now the second straight year that they've had no money as far as in the cap. But now what they did is that with all that money, because they saved last year and set this up so they can make this move, they made the moves that they couldn't make years from now. But also the problem with this, it also shows why did they go so big into this, spending over $250 million on players. And the big reason, unfortunately, is they've drafted poorly. Because particularly on offense, they've drafted poorly at wide receiver. They've done well on the offensive line. They've done well at putting poorly at tight end. They've done well at running back, and then some of the defensive players. But you think about this: they've not drafted a Pro Bowl player since Jamie Collins, and I think that's probably 2013.
Jeez.
No Pro Bowl players they've drafted since 2013. So now what they have to do to get the Pro Bowl players, they're picking them up in free agency and trying to do it at a time that the quarterback's not making any money.
It's funny because, that's been one of the big gripes here in Philadelphia is that, they haven't drafted a lot of Pro Bowl talented guys during their time, and they're not active in free agency either because of the cap situation. They got to get there by Wednesday. John, I got to be honest with you. I'm pretty intrigued by how they're going to get to that by Wednesday. I know they have to, but do we anticipate that they're going to have to get rid of a bigger name to kind of pull this off, or is this something that Roseman probably already knows what he's going to do?
Yeah, I think he knows what he's going to do because, again, that's why there was no change as far as Howie Roseman, because he's the only one in this complex cap situation that would be able to figure it out. So don't you get the feeling that Zach Ertz is going to go to a team maybe like the Los Angeles Chargers, who just lost Hunter Henry to the New England Patriots? You got the Chargers right now sitting there with 2 third-round picks. I'm sure he's eyeing one of those. Ertz is $8.25 million as far as what comes off the cap. So that's what I'm kind of wondering is that you see a Zach Ertz deal. I mean, you probably figure there's probably going to be another Lane Johnson replacement deal, because what they've already done is, try to clear as much room as they can. Now, again, everybody gets under the cap. Nobody's going to be over the cap by 4:00 Eastern time tomorrow. But in the end, it's going to strap them for not being able to do too much.
Now, for the listeners out there, when they hear restructuring a deal and they're essentially just moving, does this benefit the player? Does it benefit the team? The Eagles have done it to essentially half the roster, it feels like. What exactly in a simple form, does restructuring that deal mean to help the team out? Does it help the player out at all?
Uh, yes and no. It doesn't. I mean, certainly what it does is that you get your money up front as opposed to waiting for it in the regular season. The only difficult, and one thing I guess from the player standpoint, now your cap number gets so much bigger. Like for example, I was just looking at at my database as far as the Saints restructures, and if you include restructures from the past years and all that stuff, they've got $38 million of their cap in restructures. Because again, these are straight replacement deals. They've done about maybe 8 or 9 so far this year. I think I have to go back in memory looking at it the other day, but I think the Eagles are somewhere at about $25 million tied up in that. But all it basically is that it's not, you're not going to get traded if you keep getting that cap number bigger and bigger, because again, you're basically what teams are doing, they're borrowing money from future years. And with this year with the cap being 182.5, they needed to do something, because again, we don't know how tight the cap's going to be next year. But in the end, that's the only thing you can do. Like right now as we speak, the Los Angeles Rams are taking their 3 highest paid guys as far as the cap, except for Matthew Stafford, and they're doing replacement deals for those. So you just take the base salary out, you put the signing bonus in. Kansas City did it. Patrick Mahomes, and they had 2 big roster bonuses, one on $20 million on Chris Jones that they converted, and then $7 million on Travis Kelce. So it's just one of the things that you can always find cap room, but at some point it catches up to you.
Yep, and that's something that we're going to see here. Wednesday is the day that the Eagles need to be cap compliant. And, John, as we're seeing all over the league, there's some pretty good players that are all of a sudden on the free agent market because their team could not figure out a way to get under the cap. So you see a guy like Adoree Jackson get released today. You've got Damian Williams. The Chiefs released their 2, the running back. They released their 2 starting tackles. I mean, not everybody wants to release these guys. They just can't physically find ways to keep them.
No, my count right now, there's been about maybe 80 guys that have been released for cap purposes, which is really high for this time of year. And I mean, you're looking at because look for example that Kevin Zeitler is a pretty good guard.
Yeah.
He ends up going to Baltimore after being cut for a 3-year deal at $22 million. And these guys are all going to be available on the cheap. I mean, today Rodney Hudson got cut by the Las Vegas Raiders, and so now they're down. In fact, we're waiting to find out if Gabe Jackson got cut because they've told him he's going to be waived, but that hasn't happened yet. But, yeah, there's a lot of good players in the street, and they're going to be coming in at smaller numbers, which, of course, is quite affordable. And look at, for example, at some of the tackles now. Fisher and Schwartz. Schwartz is probably going to retire. Riley Reif is out there. You got Trey Turner, a 5-time Pro Bowler who's 30 years old. He got released, so he's available. We'll see about Gabe Jackson. But, yeah, there's some good players out there that have hit the market, and they're not going to get big money.
Hey, Ryan Fitzpatrick goes to Washington. He's bounced all over, but, he's obviously giving credibility to teams. They won the division last year, but does this, in your mind, make them the favorite in the NFC East?
I think right now you have to go back. If they don't lose too much on defense, I'd go to the Dallas Cowboys because they do have Dak Prescott. They've got 3 great receivers. Obviously the health of their offensive line is going to be a key because it wasn't healthy last year, and they've taken they did 3 replacement deals on their offensive linemen, and so they're going to be there for several years. And now it's a matter of just getting the defense better. But I think the fact that you've got Dak, a powerful offense, an offensive line, if it's healthy, is going to be good. That's the key right now to keep them in the mix to win the division. But yeah, I mean you can look at the division, but here's the weird part. Of the 63 deals that have been done, there's only been maybe 12 by NFC teams. I find it amazing because what you're seeing is Jacksonville, Houston, and the New England Patriots have dominated, but all these teams have low cap numbers, although not in the case of Deshaun Watson for Houston, but it's like, all the action has been on the AFC side, not the NFC side.
A lot of quarterbacks too, though, John. By the way, Jacoby Brissett just went to Miami, so they got a new backup down there in Miami. But we saw Andy Dalton go to Chicago. The quarterbacks are starting to move all over the place. Tyrod Taylor, he ends up in Houston. So, and we just mentioned Fitzpatrick. So, while there's not a lot of movement on the NFC side, the quarterbacks are starting to move a little bit. So what's some interesting quarterback stories in this offseason that you're still keeping an eye on? Obviously, there's some trades that could be happening, but we're starting to see these veterans move.
Yeah, this puts the next one going to be Sam Darnold. I mean, I thought that Andy Dalton was going to be the next quarterback to go because Denver was interested, and so he goes to Chicago on the 1-year, $10 million deal, and then of course that Fitzpatrick ends up getting 1 year's $10 million. I mean, we put the deal out in Houston as far as Tyrod Taylor saying he can make up to 12, but we've seen that happen a couple of times. That tells me, because it was like on the Cam Newton deal, they said he can make up to 14. So that tells me that Taylor went there basically on a 1-year deal at $5 million. It has a lot of incentives, but we're starting to run out of quarterbacks right now. I mean, Chase Daniels just got cut by the Detroit Lions, so he'll probably be one of the next ones to go someplace. But he's a pure backup. You got certainly Alex Smith. You wonder, is he going to go now to the Denver Broncos because they wanted somebody to compete against Drew Lock? So the numbers are starting to shrink a little bit, and then of course we have to wait another, let's say 3 weeks before Sam Darnold probably gets traded because he'll be the next big name as far as the quarterback movement.
Now, speaking of quarterbacks, what is your feeling on how these quarterbacks might go? Not in terms of where, but how many we might see go in that first 10 picks of the draft. I mean, you're seeing wonky stuff like 4 in the first 7 picks, 5 could be going. I mean, do you feel like it's going to be that busy at the top half of this draft with all these quarterbacks?
I think it is because I think, it could go as high as 5, but I tend to doubt that. But what you're looking at is, I think 4 could go in the top 8. And the reason for that is, you've got 2 teams, like Washington signed, Fitzpatrick, who's old. Okay.
Yep.
So now you get the feeling that their next move, even though they have Taylor Heineke as the backup quarterback, is that they could draft a quarterback, but they're drafting 17th, and they'd have to trade above the New England Patriots to be able to do something. And then you wonder with what's going on in New England, it's like, okay, they're not going to pay for a big quarterback right now because they've got Cam Newton, but they could trade up to try to go maybe to 7 to see if they can get a quarterback. So again, Carolina's probably going to take a quarterback. We know Detroit's considering taking a quarterback. Jets probably at number 2 taking a quarterback. So I could see 4 going in the top 8.
That'll be interesting. Where do you see a guy like Kyle Pitts in this draft? We've heard so much about him tied to Philadelphia. If you look at a lot of mock drafts, which aren't gospel, obviously, but it gives you an indication that people think this guy could go that high in the draft. Is he a top 10? Is that too high? Top 5? Where do you see a guy like Pitts?
He could be a top 5 because, I could see him even going as high as Cincinnati's pick in the first round. That's how talented he is. Because, I mean, you got 2 receivers that'll probably go in the top 10. But, I mean, I think he's definitely going to go in the top 10. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him go, not 4 because Atlanta doesn't need a tight end. But I know that Cincy could look to get a tight end. And that could be a consideration for them, particularly in them going out and getting 2 cornerbacks in free agency, taking care of a defensive spot. And, the only thing that may throw that off for Cincinnati for Pitts is that if they wanted to take the Oregon tackle, because that's the one area they didn't address when Joe Thuney ended up getting his deal and going to the Kansas City Chiefs.
We'll leave you with this. John Clayton's with us, always excellent. The Washington Post. Make sure you check out his NFL coverage as always. Just being reported now that the Eagles have given Zach Ertz permission to pursue a trade. In football terms, in NFL terms, when the team gives you permission to pursue a trade, what's the indication there?
The indication is it gives you the ability to try to negotiate a contract and see what you can do. Because here's Ertz, and last year won 8.25. He can maybe work out some kind of a 2-3 year deal to see what team. And again, we'll see if Seattle's going to be involved. I'm guaranteeing that the Chargers are going to be involved. But no, what that does by giving him the chance to do it is, find someplace where he's going to be comfortable enough with the deal, and then see if they can get the draft choice compensation, because you figure it's going to be maybe a 3 or a 4. But again, at 8.25, that's not a killer under the cap.
Yep, and I know we've talked before about Seattle's interest. You said they don't have a 3, so it would have to be a 4 if they were to get involved, and we'll see. I mean, because it's weird. This whole Ertz thing is, he was frustrated, and then today it was, well, they're not in a rush to trade him, and now 2 hours later, well, they've given him permission to go seek a trade. It feels like this thing is all over the place.
Yeah, which tells me that this is not going to be a long conversation that he's going to have with other teams. That tells me if he can't find a team that's comfortable with him and can get some kind of a deal, that he'll be cut by 4 o'clock tomorrow.
All right. We will keep our eye on that. John Clayton, we're always keeping an eye on at the Washington Post. And, of course, here on the Sports Bash is NFL free agency opens at 4 o'clock officially tomorrow. John just gave you the time. It's only 1 o'clock where he is, but 4 o'clock where we are. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. John, we always appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Always fun. Great stuff.